Hi everyone, and welcome to Teaching Natural. My name's Dare. I'm finishing my 4th year as a high school English teacher, 2nd year as an avid teacher, and this video is the first in my Diversifying Your Classroom Library series. This first video is going to focus on the LGBTQ community and how you can represent them in your classroom library. So let's get started. To start off, I want to be very clear that I am not a member of the LGBTQ plus community. However, my classroom library is just one way that I am an ally to the community and help other teachers who might not know where to go or just want to refresh their classroom library. So there are 4 main reasons that I'm making this video. Number 1 is to bring light to LGBTQ plus characters as well as writers, because I know that our curriculum does not show these characters very well, and so by having an independent reading library, that's one way you can show these characters. To pair along with that, I also want to expose students to new voices and the voices of people who are traditionally marginalized or discriminated against, both in independent reading as well as in our curriculum. I want to give teachers some resources, so there will be a lot of links in the description about some of the books that I'm going to talk about, as well as some of the other sources I'm going to talk about in support of these books. And the last reason for making this video is so that I can gain resources myself. You all have a wide variety of knowledge, and you have books that I've never heard of or authors that might be really good, and I'm looking for different ways to incorporate LGBTQ plus characters and writers in our curriculum as well as in my library. Alrighty, to start us off, I thought we'd start off with a really cute children's book. I think I got this from Joanne's actually, and it is called This Little Rainbow. It is by Joan Holub, and I believe it is illustrated by Daniel Rode. And it is just this really adorable children's book that goes through a lot of people in the LGBTQ community. It has both people of color and people who are traditionally discussed as white. So you can see a whole lot of different people. It has a really, really awesome dictionary, a little vocabulary sheet there for young readers, or honestly for parents and guardians who might not know some of these things. And so the back reads, "Little rainbows have big, loving hearts." So this is a really awesome series. This is a easy one that might lead to a research project or might lead to any kind of project really that's asking people to look at different people in society or in history. This is a great way to get some people started and to learn about people you might not have even known were in the LGBTQ community. The next book I have is Queer There and Everywhere, 23 People Who Changed the World by Sarah Prager. The back reads, "In Queer There and Everywhere, activist Sarah Prager gives voice to 23 people who invented, radicalized, or trailblazed. These inspiring true stories demonstrate how rich and varied gender and sexuality have been in every culture in every millennium. From long ago heroes like gender-ambitious Queen of Sweden and a transgender soldier who risked death fighting in the Civil War to modern figures like the transgender tennis player who won a court case to play as a woman, and a drag queen who organized against police brutality in San Francisco. Not only have queer people always existed, they have thrived." And so here is a really awesome one. Prager herself is a part of the LGBTQ community. She is married to a woman, and it's just a really great book that can piggyback onto This Little Rainbow. About 23 more people or some of the same people to develop that knowledge. So here's another book in my library. These next 2 books, Hear Us Out, Lesbian and Gay Stories of Struggle, Progress, and Hope from 1950 to the present meaning 2007, that's when this book was published, and Molly's Family. These are both by Nancy Garden. Nancy Garden was a member of the LGBTQ community. She was lesbian. She lived with her partner, Sandy Scott, and she was best known for Annie on My Mind. And so Hear Us Out is a collection of stories. This is nonfiction. It does talk about different decades, of course, the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. There are a lot of texts that have to do with the AIDS crisis. So that is something if you're talking about infectious diseases Or if you're talking about movements in history, this would be a really good one, especially for social science or biology teachers. This would be great. And then for elementary teachers or parents and guardians, you have Molly's Family. And Molly's Family talks about a young girl who does have two moms. It has some beautiful illustrations of different characters. And not only does it center around an LGBTQ family, but it also has a lot of diverse characters within it there. And so the summary here is, the members of Mrs. Marston's kindergarten class are busily cleaning and decorating their room for the upcoming open school night, when everybody's family is invited to visit. Molly and Stephen and Tanya and Tommy work on drawing pictures to put on the walls. Molly draws her family, Mommy, Mama Lou, and her puppy, Sam. But when Tommy looks at her picture, he tells her it's not of a family. You can't have a mommy and a mama, he says. Molly doesn't know what to think. No one else in her class has two mothers. She isn't sure she wants her picture to be on the wall for the open school night. But after talking to Mommy, Mama Lou, and Miss Marston, Molly does some hard thinking and realizes that even if a family is different from others, it can still be a happy, loving, and real family. And so this might be a really good one to explain that some people have two moms or two dads, or even that some students might not live with their biological mom or their biological dad, but it is still a family. So this is a really, really cute children's book. The next book is If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. This is a book about a transgender character, and it was written by a transgender woman. Russo herself is transgender. The insert reads, Amanda Hardy is the new girl in school at Lambertville, Tennessee. Like any other girl, all she wants is to make friends and fit in. But Amanda is keeping a secret. There's a reason why she transferred schools for her senior year, and why she's determined not to get too close to anyone. And then she meets Grant Everett. Grant is unlike anyone she's ever met. Open, honest, kind, and Amanda can't help but start to let him into her life. As they spend more time together, she finds herself yearning to share everything about herself, including her past. But she's terrified that once she tells Grant the truth, he won't be able to see past it. Because the secret that Amanda's been keeping, it's that she used to be Andrew. And so this is a really good book about transgender teens, and students might really love it. This one is definitely for the older grades, so it's in my high school library. Okay, the next two are by David Levithan, and if you have not read anything by him, great young adult writer. I came across him because John Green wrote with him and recommended him, and so I was like, okay, let's see what he's got. And so these two ones, we have Two Boys Kissing and Boy Meets Boy. Two Boys Kissing, the back reads, The two boys kissing are Craig and Harry. They're hoping to set the world's record for longest kiss. They're not a couple, but they used to be. Peter and Neil are a couple. Their kisses are different. Avery and Ryan have only just met and are trying to figure out what happens next. Both of them worry that something will go wrong. Cooper is alone. It's getting to the point where he doesn't really feel things anymore. These boys, along with their friends and families, form a tapestry that will reveal love of all kinds, open and eager, tentative and cautious, pained and scared. New York Times bestselling author David Levithan has sewn together their lives into a redemptive whole that is, as the Los Angeles Times called it, open, frank, and ultimately optimistic. Then Boy Meets Boy is, love is never easy, especially if you're Paul. He's a sophomore at a high school like no other, and these are his friends. Infinite Darlene, the homecoming queen and star quarterback. Johnny, Paul's best friend, who may not be his best friend anymore. Tony, his other best friend, who can't leave the house unless his parents think he's going on a date with a girl. Kyle, the ex-boyfriend who won't go away. And Rip, the school bookie who sets the odds. And Noah, the boy, the one who changes everything. Love meets love, confusion meets clarity, boy meets boy. So these are some good ones. These are high school grades, and they might even be some middle school grades there, depending on if you're, 8th grade or 7th grade teacher. The next two books, Aristotle and Dante. I will say Aristotle and Dante is probably my favorite book. It's a tie between this one and The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. But Aristotle and Dante discover the secrets to the universe. I wish I had read it as a teenager. It is beautiful. And the back reads, Dante can swim, Ari can't. Dante is articulate and self-assured. Ari has a hard time with words and suffers from self-doubt. Dante gets lost in poetry and art. Ari gets lost in the thoughts of his older brother who's in prison. Dante is fair-skinned. Ari's features are much darker. It seems that a boy like Dante, with his open and unique perspective on life, would be that last person to break down the walls that Ari has built around himself. But against all odds, when Ari and Dante meet, they develop a special bond that will teach them the most important truths of their lives and help them to find the people they want to be. But there are big hurdles in their way, and only by believing in each other and the power of their friendship can Ari and Dante emerge stronger on the other side. So Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets to the Universe is the first book. Beautiful. I love it. And then Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World is the second book. I have not read the second one yet just because I love the happy ending of Aristotle and Dante. And so I'm like, I don't want that to not go well because unfortunately a lot of LGBTQ plus characters do not have happy endings. That is changing. Thank goodness with media and books there are now getting healthy, happy endings and stories that don't revolve around them just being LGBTQ. I'm sure the second book is great. My friend has read it. She has told me it's amazing, but I think I'm just holding on to my happy ending of this one. However, the books are written by Benjamin Alir-Sanez. I probably butchered that. I am so sorry. It's written by him, and he said that he came out as gay at the age of 52, and writing was a way for him to kind of deal with the struggles that he had of being gay in the 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way up till he was 54 and not being able to be out about it. So these two books, the Aristotle and Dante, highly recommend. Beautiful. They're always checked out with my library. The next one is Dreadnought. This is by April Daniels. And it is a series. I don't have the second book of the series yet. My students are really mad at me because they want to read the second book in the series. And so they're like, can you please hurry up and get it? And I'm like, I'm sorry. So the back of Dreadnought reads, Danny Tozer has a problem. She just inherited the powers of Dreadnought, the world's greatest superhero. Until Dreadnought fell out of the sky and died right in front of her, Danny was trying to keep people from finding out she's transgender. But before he expired, Dreadnought passed his mantle to her, and those secondhand superpowers transformed Danny's body into what she's always thought it should be. Now there's no hiding that she's a girl. It should be the happiest time of her life, but Danny's first weeks finally living in a body that fits her are more difficult and complicated than she could have imagined. Between her father's dangerous obsession with curing her girlhood, her best friend suddenly acting like he's entitled to date her, and her fellow superheroes arguing over her place in their ranks, Danny feels like she's in over her head. She doesn't have time to adjust. Dreadnought's murderer, a cyborg named Utopia, still haunts the streets of Newport City, threatening destruction. If Danny can't sort through the confusion of coming out, master her powers, and stop Utopia in time, humanity faces extinction. And so this is a really good one for your students who are into adventure or action. April Daniels herself is a transgender woman, so this is a transgender female character written by a transgender woman. And it's just a really good one. I'm not all the way through it, but so far I am enjoying it. Red. It's an absolute mess because my students check this book out all the time. This is the one where if they're like, oh, I hate independent reading, I hate books, it's so stupid, give them Red and they will just fall. If you haven't heard of Red, this is a story about a crayon. I know. I wrote it for you. Hey, I'm friends with that crayon. I love this story. And you have these cute little crayons. Red is written by Michael Hall, and it is about a crayon that is labeled as red but writes blue. It's the sweetest freaking story of this little crayon, and everybody gets so attached to it. I got this book from one of my colleagues. She's an English teacher, and she has 2 daughters. At the time, I believe they were a second and a first grader, or they might have been a first grader or a kindergartner when she gave it to me. And she was like, this book was really, really helpful as a parent or guardian to explain what transgender children can go through, or really just anybody who has been labeled one way but they feel a different way. It doesn't even have to specifically be transgender, but Michael Hall has been very clear that it was an influence for him. And so Red, such an adorable children's book, and really does get to the heartstrings. I think my entire high school classes would recommend Red. This next one, Tell Me How You Really Feel by Aminah May Safi or Safi. This one is awesome because it is by a Muslim American writer, and the characters themselves are Muslim. And I believe they're Muslim American. Yes, they're Muslim American. And so that is something very rare. You don't always see Muslims represented in the LGBTQ community. And so the back of this reads, the first time Sana Khan asked a girl out, Rachel Retch, it went so badly that she never did it again. Rachel is a film buff and an aspiring director, and she's seen Carrie enough times to learn you can never trust cheerleaders. Rachel was furious that Sana tried to prank her by asking her on a date. But when it comes time for Rachel to cast her senior project, she realizes that there's no one more perfect than Sana to play the lead role. And poor Sana, she says yes. She never did get over the first crush, even if Rachel can barely stand to be in the same room as her. In this rom-com told from alternating viewpoints and set against the backdrop of LA in the springtime, these 2 girls are about to learn that in the city of dreams, anything is possible, even love. So here's another really good one for definitely high school and the older middle school grades. Okay, the last book I have for you is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Madeline Miller is an expert on Greek and Roman mythology, and she was also a teacher. She wrote this about Patroclus and Achilles during the Iliad, the Trojan War, and their canon relationship that is often kind of covered up as if it's not an LGBTQ relationship, a gay relationship. It is, and Madeline Miller wrote a novelization of it from Patroclus's perspective. So it reads, Achilles, the best of all the Greeks, son of the cruel sea goddess Thetis and the legendary king Peleus, is strong, swift, and beautiful, irresistible to all who meet him. Patroclus is an awkward young prince exiled from his homeland after an act of shocking violence. Brought together by chance, they forge an inseparable bond, despite risking the gods' wrath. They are trained by the centaur Chiron in the arts of war and medicine, but when word comes that Helen of Sparta has been kidnapped, all the heroes of Greece are called upon to lay siege to Troy in her name. Seduced by the promise of a glorious destiny, Achilles joins their cause, and torn between love and fear for his friend, Patroclus follows. Little do they know that the cruel fates will test them both as never before and demand a terrible sacrifice. My students absolutely love this because they are Greek and Roman nerds like myself, but they really do enjoy reading this. All right, so those were, I believe, 13 books that I have in my classroom library. I used to have different books like Simon versus the Homo sapien Agenda, but my students love them so much that they keep them and they never bring them back. So I'm always having to replenish, but you know, if they take a book, I'm happy. That means they loved it, and that means I got them into reading. So that was the fun part. I do want to leave you with some protections. I personally teach in an area that is quite conservative and quite not friendly to the community. And so I wanted to leave you with some of the things that I have learned trying to be an ally and having a diverse curriculum and a diverse class library. So the first thing, CYA. I'm going to cuss, so cover your ass. You want to make sure that you wrap yourself in as much legal and pedagogical protection as you can, so that if there is a question as to why this book is in your classroom, you don't feel attacked and you don't feel like you are kind of spinning on a wheel trying to think of a defense. You kind of want to already have them ready. I teach in California, so In California, we have SB 48, which is the Fair Education Act. It specifically says that we have to recognize diverse populations. That includes the LGBTQ community and how they have added to history, have added to literature, and have added to California as a whole. The next protection you have is Title IX. And Title IX forbids the discrimination based on sex. That was added to with Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia in 2020. That sex also included gender, sexual orientation, and sexual expression. So that also covers transgender youth. So those are Title IX and Bostock versus Clayton County, Georgia are protections that everybody in the United States has. It's not just California. The next resource you have is the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project did a 2022 study on suicide of LGBTQ plus youth. And if you aren't familiar with that study or with the Trevor Project, I'll have all this stuff linked down below. But the Trevor Project has found a lot of unfortunate statistics that don't have to happen. They found that 45% of LGBTQ plus youth seriously considered attempting suicide, and that included more than half transgender and non-binary youth. And that is just an awful statistic for anyone to see, whether you personally agree with the community, whether you're an ally, or whether you don't. Just the fact that so many young people, students, are thinking that they have to end their lives, that in and of itself, if there is something we can do, if a children's book can do it, let's do it. And so that is something you can use to say, hey, my library needs to be diverse, because we have a whole lot of studies that show if we can just show some representation of this community, these students feel better. They feel more connected. The next protection that I have, and I'm sure you can use it in your classroom as well, are the IB Global Issues. The IB Global Issues specifically call out that students should be able to see how sexuality, race, ethnicity, class all play a part in a piece of literature. And so this is something you can use to do literary circles, or just to have these books in your classroom. The IB Global Issues. I personally teach in an IB school. However, if you don't teach in an IB school, IB is what internationally colleges say students should be able to do. And so if that is one of the pushes for your education system, then IB can help. If you aren't in an IB school and you can't really use those protections, Learning for Justice, formerly known as Teaching for Tolerance, have the social justice standards, and those do talk about identity and culture and community. So those are some things you can use to support why you have these books in your library if anybody questions them. The next thing I would recommend is to look at your school board's language. Most school boards in the United States do have something that says anti-discrimination based on sex, gender, race, the whole umbrella. And so looking at your school's specific language would really, really help you, so that you know what your school district is working towards. Also look at your specific school's language. That is something, again, you can use to say, well, these are our core values, or this is our mission statement or our vision, and that is why I have these books in my library. The last thing that I do to make sure I'm ahead of the curve is I put it in my syllabus on independent reading. I say that students will choose their own school-appropriate, age-appropriate books, and that I personally do not censor books. It is completely on the student to choose their independent reading book. They can get their independent reading book from our school library, my classroom library, any bookstore, Amazon, anything like that. And so I say that it is completely on the student to choose their independent reading book, that I do not censor books. And that is just something I put on my syllabus to, again, cover my ass, so that in case a student picks up one of these books, parent/guardian sees it and is like, why are they reading that book? And I just say, well, they chose it, and I made it very clear that I was not going to steer students in one direction or another. So that was the first video on diversifying my library, just in time for Pride, starting with our LGBTQ plus community. I hope you saw some awesome books that you can add to your classroom library or your curriculum. And if you have some great books that I've never heard of, please put them in the comment section below. I am always looking for some new books to add to my library to make sure that as many viewpoints that I can show are here. Also, if you have some other ways that teachers can protect themselves in case there is a question about the materials in their classroom, please put those below. I'm sure I will find a lot of great tips that I can add to my own classroom. So, in the meantime and in between time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!